for joining us for the session about partnerships for inclusive development in Namibia. I'm standing in for my colleague Nagula Uanja, and so our presentation really is around really the investment environment, but then also, of course, in actual fact, some concrete projects that have been listed with the NIPDB over the past few months. Investors we've been working with, investors looking for funding, but also investors looking for partners. And I think this is really the point of this session, is to identify those partners or potential partners from not only the audience, but also people watching at home. Yes, so and thank you also for Namibians, but also our other international partners that are joining us online. Maybe for those that are interested in asking questions afterwards, if they do come up and you're not in the audience, please feel free to email them to info@nipdb.com, and it'll be passed on to me. So maybe to start off, why invest in Namibia? So clearly, as a Namibian, I can give you a million reasons why to invest in Namibia, but as an investor, you might see it slightly differently. So Namibia, in our particular sub-region, we're definitely one of the most stable, politically most stable countries. Namibia has really transitioned from a non-democracy into a democracy over a number of years, and we are now going through really our fourth cycle of electing a new president in a couple of years. So definitely it's a stable political system, political regime, and clearly we benefit from that on various levels. So for those of you that know Namibia, obviously, given the size of the country, the financial system is relatively sophisticated, and there's a level of complexity. So it doesn't really necessarily talk to consumer finance, but also commercial and corporate finance. There's also a large number of asset managers, and I think we're quite proud to say that we, in fact, have, I think, the third largest pension fund industry on the continent. Government has, over a number of years, and really since 2010 in particular, spent a lot of capital on upgrading roads, upgrading our port, but also other initiatives. And really this, together with other infrastructure development, is one of the key areas we've been focusing on as a government and as a country. Namibia is primarily positioned on the southwestern coast of Africa, and clearly a port of entry. Maybe if I can just skip forward and show you on this map here. Clearly a port of entry into the sub-region. So as you can see, Namibia is bordering a number of landlocked neighbors, including Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. And then, of course, DRC, we access via Zambia. So these markets are all growing markets. They clearly, in particular the DRC, with quite a large population, and also as relative wealth is growing in that country, we see the DRC is a key market for Namibia and for Namibian companies in particular to export products to over time. So when you look at not only the quality of the roads we've been building, but also a commitment to expand our railway network, both into neighboring countries, but also domestically, and of course the port, in comparison to many other ports in the region, some of the major ports with not only security issues, but also in particular congestion, there's definitely a case to be made for Namibia to be one of the key areas, or one of the key ports really to look at from a logistics and in particular supply chain point of view. So maybe if I can just flick back, I've kind of moved on a little bit. I just wanted to touch on a couple of issues. So the one is in particular around market access. So as a signatory of a number of trade agreements, Namibia, as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area's various protocols are unfolding, there's definitely a promise for Namibia also to benefit from that. part of that benefit for Namibia, of course, is to not only trade continentally in a more kind of aligned and a coordinated way, but also at the same time to be in a position where we will be working with our colleagues in SADC and SACU to align those protocols and perhaps end up in a better situation. From a European markets point of view, of course, we have a preferential access for a number of products. I think that's probably quite well known, in particular for beef and other agricultural products. The same with AGOA. So exporting to North America is slightly easier through that. And although that agreement is coming to an end, we believe that other arrangements are being put in place as we speak. And then with Mercosur for South America, and in particular the countries on the eastern coast of of that particular continent, which we have been trading with for a number of years in any event. So I think it's important to highlight the accessibility of the workforce. So we have a relatively well-educated workforce, and so there is a question of how can you as an investor potentially leverage that resource, potentially retrain young people or people to work in your company. I think the rest are kind of common sense, so I'll just I'll skip over those. I think one of the key areas really for us is to talk about rule of law. So what we've seen in other areas in Africa in particular is where, for example, contracts are concluded and then neither government or the private sector players honor those contracts. And that's definitely something in Namibia that doesn't work. We have a solid and a well-developed court and legal system. There is rights of recourse for not only investors but for creditors in particular. And so as an investor, that obviously plays a very important role when you think of where to deploy your capital. Also at the same time, when you look at the Foreign Investment Act, which is the act that currently regulates foreign investment in Namibia, there are certain freedoms that have been granted in terms of nationalization. You're free to remit capital and profits either at the end of your investment or on an annual basis in terms of profits. And then currency convertibility and the accessibility of currency when you want to exit your particular investment. And then, of course, there are several equitable dispute settlement mechanisms, which not only through international bodies, but also, like I said, through domestic courts. What is quite important to note is that Namibia has public procurement and public-private partnership laws in place. And so many of the government projects really focus and revolve or is managed under those particular frameworks. I think, let me just skip on from licensing regimes. I think it's something that's quite well developed, in particular in the natural resources area. And maybe to not labor it too much, but there's definitely a question of, so how can you best access resources without necessarily making life too difficult for yourself? So from a legislative reform point of view, that is something that government has been working on, not only the NIPDB, but it's really a cross-government effort. So there's various areas in terms of legislation that we are currently re-looking at in order to promote investment. So we spoke about the accessible workforce, but we also need to indicate that there is potentially funding available to retrain Namibians through and also in terms of qualifications. There's some work to be done by potential employers to not only accredit the particular training regime, but also to benefit from the regulations and the regimes that are in place at the moment. So as a country, we struggle with high unemployment, and that's something I think is not unknown, is a problem really in the region. But we're very proud to have a young and a hustling culture. And so people are willing to work hard and apply themselves. So from a market access point of view, I think I've touched on that, but maybe just to see it on the map here. So the yellow is the Africa tripartite agreement, the SACU SADC, and COMESA. The green countries are, of course, within the European Union, and the USA, is AGOA, and then Mercosur is these South American countries I referenced earlier. So the question then really is, as an investor, and this is what the questions we as an investment board have on a continuous basis, is where to invest. And so it's obviously, if you don't know Namibia well, it is a bit more of a complicated question to answer, but I'll try my best, and if you have questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer them. So government has identified really 8 kind of key sectors we are focusing on. So those priority sectors in the top line, which is agri and food processing, metals and mining, tourism, renewables, transport and logistics, global business services, chemicals, and basic materials in the machinery and electronics. And so these priority sectors is informed by research we did with one of our partners, and effectively when we look at these really are a blend of the economy. So in a way, you'll find that some of these sectors we can generate jobs and opportunities really quickly. So, for example, services is a good one, and some of these opportunities or some of these sectors obviously are more developed than others. And then if you look at kind of bounce back ability, if I can put it that way. So tourism, for example, I think once COVID has kind of let up, we've realized that actually we're almost back to our numbers where we were pre-COVID in terms of tourism. So that obviously has helped a lot, together with the partnership we now have with Lufthansa, and we're also working with other airline partners, really to bring more visitors to Namibia. And that obviously has a very deep and important impact on the economy. We want people to spend money in the economy. I think the other point really is around agriculture. So we all know that agriculture plays a very important role in the economy, but also from the point of, so how do we make our agricultural economy more productive? And so also government is doing work in that particular respect. And so I think from a long-term and short-term point of view, so when we talk about chemicals and basic materials, so green hydrogen falls into that particular category. And so when you look at the wider way to invest, it is about diversifying our economy. So we recognize that as a resources-based, formerly resources-based economy, there are certain risks associated with that, and we had to take certain strategic leaps to other sectors and industries in order to bring in a diversification of income. So these are broadly those. Now, often, and especially when you're new to Africa or new to investing in Africa, it might seem, quite overwhelming. And we believe also, we know also that in other countries, sometimes government is quite prescriptive about where to put your money. Well, we don't operate like that. We operate a free market economy. So when you have capital and you have an idea, you can put your money wherever. You don't need government's permission other than complying with regulation and law. And it's a question of once you follow that regulation and law and you tick the boxes, you're welcome to operate your business in Namibia. The point is that we believe that we're not the only ones with good ideas. We actually believe in the fact that the free market generates a lot of the best ideas we see out there. But nonetheless, the NIPDB, or the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, we also promote projects on behalf of project owners. We participate in many forums like this at WEF this week, but we were in Dubai earlier this year with the Dubai Expo 2020, and of course these platforms give exposure to various project owners and their projects for us. And so to that extent, there are existing private projects that we promote on behalf of government and also on behalf of the private sector. But they're also published public sector projects. In other words, these are the tenders, the RFPs, and other forms of procurement that the government publishes from time to time. And of course, we support them in that as well. So those are available as well, but typically under competitive bidding circumstances. And then lastly, like I said before, and I kind of preempted that option is, so the areas of investment opportunity is really for you to create your own. So we recognize that, for example, when you look at transport and logistics as a sector, supply chain challenges is a major one in not only the Southern African economy, but also definitely across the continent. And so how do we kind of capitalize on those opportunities, and how do we convert them into income and revenue for your company? So I wanted to touch on a couple of projects per the priority sectors. You'll find that if you scan that QR code, and we'll also place this slide pack online, the NIPDB has a dedicated mini site. The address is https://wave.nipdb.com. And so you'll find the slide pack and also the slide pack of all the other presenters today and for the rest of the week on there. But if you scan that particular QR code, it'll take you to actually a more comprehensive catalog with more information around particular projects. So I wanted to maybe just touch on the public projects, the green schemes and irrigation projects. So many of you might know the government owns a number of green schemes. So these are typically large irrigation projects that are based in the north of Namibia, but also now of late near Neckartal Dam, which is in the deep south. And the idea of these green schemes really is to secure food supply. So it's about security of supply and how Namibia can go about making sure that domestically we can provide and produce more food economically, but also using that particular fact to create jobs. On Wednesday, we have a session where the Ministry of Agriculture will present those opportunities. So please join us for those as well. And actually, you can see in this particular sector, there are a number of other potential investment opportunities in the private sector. These companies and project owners are looking for either funders or investment partners or technical partners. Please consult the catalog per the QR code. So I think maybe just a little bit of detail on the agri side of it. So like we said, there'll be a bidding process on the public green schemes. There are also various sizes, but it is about, it is at the end of the day, it's about producing food. And so why invest in this sector? Well, it's a well-established industry in a way. So not only horticulture, but in particular livestock. Namibia is really a leader in the subcontinent for livestock production, producing natural and organic meat that's been actually for decades been exported to Europe and the US. But also we're a grapes and date producer to be reckoned with, very high quality product. That's also mainly sold in Middle Eastern and Western markets. And then, of course, fisheries or fish that's being exported to Europe. There is security in the fact that private land tenure is actually a relatively uncomplicated system. And so when you look at, working with potential partners, or when you're working with potential project owner, I think that's kind of one of the easy parts of investing in agriculture. So when it comes down to private land ownership, the rules are very clear and unambiguous, actually, and it's a question of understanding them well. We always recommend to investors to find local counsel to support you in that. And I think the national, regional, and international need for certain types of foods, we recognize that Namibia has the potential to be a bigger producer of not only, of course, beef and lamb, but also of horticultural products. So we touched on mining, chemicals, and adjacent industries. So again, the development of a number of large public projects. These are quite big ticket items, if I can put it that way. I don't want to kind of dwell on them too long, but you can find more detail about these in the catalog. In respect of the private project, so Lodestone Mining is an iron ore mine near the capital Windhoek. Lodestone has they've developed their assets up to almost phase 2, so they're looking to expand into further deposits, and definitely it is one to look at. So tourism and real estate. We're talking about the development of a student village as a public project, but in particular, in Wednesday's session, again, the tourism session, there'll be further presentation, further information around opportunities within the tourism sector. And again, government is looking to commercialize some tourism assets, and we believe that that might be something if you're a large player and interested in certain concessions, then that's definitely the session to look at. So in private projects, so President's Links is a lifestyle golf estate currently being developed on the outskirts of Walvis Bay. It's a substantial project, around about $4.5 billion, and with a view of creating a number of jobs. They're looking to break ground in October of this year, but they're still looking for further investment. So if real estate is your thing, then this might definitely be a project to look at as well. That's also in the catalogue. And I think many viewers and also the audience here will be interested in renewable energy in particular. So maybe just to explain the market for those that are new to Namibia, how the market kind of operates, the electricity market operates. So aside from the green hydrogen projects, I think which we'll discuss really at length this week, it is important to note that there are a number of regulations around offtake by NamPower, which is the national utility, and so. In particular, NamPower, like most other government entities, they truly go through a procurement round to not only secure production but also other types of transmission assets. So it is what you would expect from a government institution, but still quite lucrative projects. And NamPower has a 5-year rolling development plan. You can find that on their website, which is nampower.com.na, and there you can find actually more information around how they particularly operate their procurement regime. What is quite important to note that is that so due to the relaxation in domestic law and in domestic regulation around energy, the selling of energy into the grid. There are a number of other opportunities available in this space, and maybe it's useful for me to identify those. So we're operating a modified single buyer system, where if you're an independent power producer, so you decide to take the risk, build a facility, then you are also able to sell to large energy users. So whether they're industrial or commercial, and also through our arrangements with the Southern African Power Pool. We are now able to, as an independent power producer, you're now able to sell actually directly to commercial and industrial customers within the power pool outside of the borders of Namibia. And so that we obviously encourage that export of electricity, and so to a certain extent, that's kind of one of the key opportunities that's kind of unfolding in this space. So we anticipate that the regulator and government will announce further relaxations in this space to its early next year, and we look forward to engaging with you further on those as and when they're announced. So in terms of the, I think that might have been labelled incorrectly, but so so you can see at Shono Solar, so there's a project there. And then, which is a private project, so these two labels should be turned around. And then there's a NamPower project, a 50 megawatt wind power plant. The bids are currently open. It's maybe a bit short notice, but it closes on the 3rd of June. And then there's a slightly larger project, CSP, or a concentrated solar power project. It's currently in feasibility, and depending on, of course, the outcome of the feasibility study, open bidding might follow soon. So I think the reality of it is that NamPower is a very well-disciplined company. It's a power company that has, over years, it's probably one of the best-run institutions in Namibia, in fact. And we're also one of the few countries, maybe one or two in the region, where there aren't rolling blackouts and rolling brownouts. And I think so to a certain extent, as an investor, you should appreciate that fact, that we create a stable investment environment, a stable operating environment. And so the idea is for us to kind of build on that. And this collaboration and cooperation between government and private sector will definitely grow the sector, but also we anticipate and we predict that it will enable further exports of electricity into the region. So other areas of potential investment. So we spoke about green hydrogen, and if you attended the previous session, then you would know that we are looking at green hydrogen as a potential source of electricity in the future. Of course, the technology is changing all the time, but we also know that when you talk to developers now, that many of them install dual fuel technology. So in other words, not only gas-powered power stations, but also gas-powered units, but also those units that could be used for green hydrogen in the future. And so maybe just to touch on it, and I think to echo what James Nepe said earlier, so there'll be really a two-tier industry in the interim. So we have the larger concession-based projects like we have at the in the ACDI in the Southern Development Corridor, and at the same time you have smaller scale producer like almost pilot scale producers that will have a bit more of a freer range. So in other words, they'll typically use private land to develop their project on. There'll be slightly fewer restrictions around that, and so to a certain extent, that opens the door for more IPP action. In other words, independent power producing, and then for these producers to either sell their green hydrogen or whatever other chemical they make into the market, but also at the same time the ability to use that hydrogen to generate electricity. And so some of those, I think 28 to 29 companies he referenced earlier, is looking at doing exactly that. Hydrogen is a storable energy, so that's one of the advantages you have when you look at that. So why invest in the sector? So like what we said before, is the established industry. There's abundant solar and wind resource. You have the security of private land tenure, and there's an enabling legislative and regulatory environment, and of course regional need. So we know that there's a massive shortfall of electricity supply in the region, and that obviously creates an opportunity. And it's a question of Namibia's government, but also the private sector, whether domestic or internationally, for them to collaborate. So we touched on transportation and logistics earlier, and how the infrastructure we have in place integrates within potentially supply systems, supply chains, but also not only internationally but also regionally. But there are one large public project that we are anticipating that might be announced later this year is a new international terminal at Usiakutaku Airport. That clearly is a little bit under consideration. It's a project that was on the cards before, but COVID came, some other issues turned up, and but it's being dusted off as we speak. And then there are a number of actually private projects that's worth of your consideration as well. So when you look at commercial and logistics plaza, consolidated cold storage at Walvis Bay, and then MTN, which is a regional telecoms player, they're looking to erect 4G infrastructure nationally. And clearly they are also interested in funding. So all of these projects are subject to either public procurement or funding. So the Husiakutaku airport project has not been announced yet. This is the first time we're mentioning it here. So I think those three sectors, maybe just as an example. So how to invest in Namibia, and of course the Namibians listening and the Namibians in the room would know. But for those of you that don't know, so my name is Frans van Schalkwyk. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Frans van Schalkwyk. I'm the Executive Director for Investments and New Ventures at the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board. We are your typical investment promotion agency. We're situated, or we're positioned in the Office of the President. And so from that perspective, we take our engagement with foreign and domestic investors very seriously. Our key role really is to attract investment FDI to Namibia, which obviously then enables not only development, but it enables the creation of jobs, the growth of the economy, but also at the same time to address the socioeconomic issues the country has. So our focus is investor awareness and attraction. We of course support investor assistance. We support you through investor assistance. And to give you an idea, when you start to do business in a new country or a country that's new to you, obviously it's not always that easy. So it is about how do you kind of have a soft landing in Namibia. How do you go about registering your business, obtaining permits and licenses and other permissions in order to do business? And like I said before, it's not a matter of may I come and invest. Of course you may come and invest, but it's a question of, so do my business comply with the rules? And as long as you kind of stick to the rules and regulations, typically businesses are fine to conduct their business. And of course, investor advocacy and amplification. So we work with investors, try to identify the problem areas, work with our partners in government to solve those issues. And I think it may sound worse than it is, but I think it's a question of how can we best serve our investors, who then we believe will best help the people of Namibia. And I think that is it from me now. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience. None? Maybe Margaret online? Oh, that's wonderful then. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Our next session will start in a little while. For those of you watching online, yes, like I said before, please find our program on the NIPDB website, which is nipdb.com. You'll find a link to the mini site for WEF in particular. So thank you again, and a very good afternoon to you.